Peace and welcome to the Temple of Hip Hop. I am KRS-ONE, and it is a great day for me today. I hope you guys are actually experiencing the same day, because if you remember in our seventh overstanding, you'll recall that the day is not really out here. The day is really in here. You determine what type of day you're actually going to have. And it was a weird thing we went through in terms of a teaching, because we talked about how if the day itself was one thing, then everybody would be experiencing that same thing in that same day. Like, imagine that. Like, the day was one thing and you had to experience it as it is. But it's not. The day, the circumstances, what goes on in a day, even the weather and stuff changes. The day is one continuous change in that sense. So it's like, where is the day? We taught that the day is within yourself. The way you feel about yourself, and just simply the way you feel, is what is going to determine your day. It doesn't matter what's going on out here. What matters is what's going on in here and how you interpret what's going on out here. I'm having a wonderful time right now. I'm getting ready to go on some dates as well. We're getting ready to venture out and do our thing as usual. And even as I sit here right now, talking to you, I'm thinking about a whole host of things that we are getting into. It's an exciting year. It's the 50th anniversary of hip hop. We have our exhibit going into 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. We're collecting interviews for that, artwork for that. I was just on with Chuck D, Curtis Blow, Kid Capri, Special Ed, at random times, uh, talking about this exhibit, talking also about Stop the Violence movement as well, in addition to the Hip Hop Alliance, all of this. But in this instance, the art, Chuck D is an artist. I asked him to lend us a hand as well. Curtis Blow as well is an artist, a graphic artist. I've asked him as well to help us with the exhibit. But it's just great to be in a creative mode and to be moving forward like that. I tell you, one of the cures for boredom, depression, low spiritedness is creativity. Start creating something, anything, even if it's just a paper plane. Just start creating. Well, this is the origin of hip hop, and well, what we did was we finished off the 17th overstanding, and we're now moving into the 18th overstanding, the origins of hip hop. We are almost done with our entire gospel, and congratulations. As you know, at the end of this, there'll be a test, and you'll receive your true hip hopper certification, and then we can move on even from there into higher lessons. And only those with their true hip hopper certification will be able to take on those lessons. A lot of those lessons have to do with touring, as well. You got to come with a certain character, and that starts right here with the reading of the gospel. So just before we start with the gospel of hip hop, in this section called the origins of hip hop, you hear this word being thrown around a lot. Some may hear this word being thrown around a lot these days, but as you will see, the Temple of Hip Hop is ahead again. We had this concept, the origins of hip hop, many, many years before the television series and some of the articles that are coming out now. Now that hip hop is 50 years of age, you're going to see a lot about the history of hip hop, the origins of hip hop, and so on. And like I said, referring to the television show Origins of Hip Hop, nice stories being told over there. The title itself, though, was an original title of the Temple of Hip Hop. We were looking more at the origins of actual hip hop itself. So what I want to do is not only read the origins of hip hop, which this gospel is also earlier than the terms origins of, or origin of hip hop that's being talked about and broadcasted today. And I say this humbly. I'm not bragging or anything like that. Please don't take it the wrong way. But in terms of historical accuracy, in terms of also not so much bragging, but taking pride in our work, you'll notice I'm going to play for you the film itself. We did a film called The Origins of Hip Hop, 33 minutes long film. It actually goes about 35 minutes long film, but it talks about the origins of hip hop. Those of you that have been with us for a minute, you remember this film as well, The Origins of Hip Hop. And in this film as well, you see a younger KRS-ONE, of course, and younger everybody, because it shows how long we've been doing this, how long we've been preaching this. And this is not a brag. This is a confirmation on the excellence of our work. And I thank everyone. I remember, let me shout Joseph Sanchez, Professor Sanchez, who duplicated the first 100 or so actual DVDs. I don't remember if you guys remember what a DVD, the actual DVD was. You know, it looked like a CD, you put it in and play it. Crazy. But Joseph Sanchez put out the first couple of 100 DVDs. It was well graphic, put together, and we threw them out. We gave them to the public. It wasn't something that we were selling. Maybe some of them did get sold. I can't front. They got up on the merch table at some point. But for the most part, they were going off the edge of the stage, the same way we do our tennis balls, same way we do the Hip Hop Declaration of Peace, the same way we've done the Gospel of Hip Hop, same thing. We threw these two off the edge of the stage, getting the message out there, and the message got out there. So what I want to do before we read the origins of hip hop, let us watch the film, The Origins of Hip Hop, and just go over our basic, preliminary, elementary teachings as we come toward the end of this Gospel of Hip Hop reading. Let's go over our elementary approach to hip hop. I'll be right back. Check this out.
This presentation is not going to be like normal presentations you get in an academic environment. What is the difference? The difference is, in our presentation, we're dealing with live facts and effects, not studying dead material.
KRS-ONE.
Just before we go, come on. How much time I got? Damn. All right, look. I really want to spit some more of this so you can see the raw from Chris. I really like to rock off the top to show you what's real hip-hop, not the radio. Let me tell you right now, that's not the way to go. You got to see right now what I'm saying, y'all. Me, I never did a bid, and if you did, you know you don't want that for your kid. Let me tell you right now, I'm in defiance. Stop the violence.
Welcome to another hip-hop study session. I am KRS-ONE.
How many real hip-hoppers in the place right about now?
The true history of hip-hop begins with a collection of legends, proclamations, myths, and stories, important dates and memorable moments. These are the real ingredients of any history. But when it comes to hip-hop and its real history, the actual founders and architects of original hip-hop are always left out. This is why the Temple of Hip-Hop exists, and this presentation is before you now. Everyone is entitled to their opinions and theories and experiences with hip-hop. But as authentic hip-hop scholars, you must have the facts. This presentation is all about the facts. The facts regarding hip-hop from out of the mouths of those that actually created hip-hop.
Now people say you should make the record that sell. Some say make the record that rock the house well. I'm with that program from up tempo to slow. That's why they gotta be real, because I know who I am. And inside of me, I could not see hurting all of my people for some M-O-N-E. Why should I have to stoop to that level? Kicking negativity and I'm a rebel to the devil. Like a pumper like I am. And kick it like a champ. And get the pot of gold, 3 wishes and the lamb. And come right back and roll with a sequel. Never seen a man have so much love for his people. But some black artists try their hardest to make a crossover jam, but the fans aren't the smartest, cause they be peeping it while the artists be creeping it. To the pop fans for the money and sleeping, but it's only but so many drinks you could try, till you drink all your water until your well runs dry. And there's nothing the matter with shattering racism, just be you and don't try to be him, cause it's too much knee bending, too much foot shuffling, too much booty kissing, love of selfishness and eating black people up just like cancer. I know all the symptoms, now here's some answers. Take care of your mental and physical health, and spiritually learn to love yourself. And once you do that and see that it's true, learn to love the people who look like you.
Historically, hip-hop began in New York on August 11, 1973 at approximately 9 p.m. in a community recreation center at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue on the west side of the Bronx. At the request of his sister Cindy, then known as Pep, a graffiti writer and b-boy from Jamaica, who would eventually be known as Cool DJ Herc, introduced the principles of Jamaican-style DJing to the people of the Bronx.
Way back in the days when hip-hop began, with Coke, Rock, Cool Herc, in the building. Way back in the days when hip-hop began, with Coke, Rock, Cool Herc, and then bam, B-boys ran to the ladies' jam. When it got shot up, they went home and said, damn, there's gotta be a better way to hear music every day. He was getting blown away, coming outside anyway. They tried to get outside and see the park. Power from a street light made the place dark. Yo, they didn't care, they turned it out. I know if you understand what I'm talking about. Remember, Bronx River, rolling thick, cool DJ, better learn, Chuck, kill out on the mix. When Africa Islam was rocking the jam, on the other side of town was a kid named Flash. Patterson and Millbrook Projects, Casanovas.
Hip-hop is a culture, it's a way of life, it's an awareness, it's how we think, how we move across in the world. Out of hip-hop comes rap music. In fact, out of hip-hop comes breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism.
Africa embodies peace, love, unity.
Originally, hip-hop began with 4 elements: breaking or breakdancing, MCing or rap, graffiti writing or graffiti art, DJing, cutting, mixing, scratching. It started there when we only perceived ourselves as a music genre, as an art form. But as we got older, we realized that that art form comes from somewhere, and we began to interpret our consciousness. Then we added on beatboxing, street fashion, street language, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism, because we realized that in order to live hip-hop, we were going to have to deal with the totality of who we are as a people. Hip-hop is a new nation. Hip-hop is a new civilization upon the earth.
Hip-hop. Congratulations.
Fugees was about to break up.
Yo.
I had a lie. I was like, yo, Chris, man, what you think we should do, man? He was like, yo, it's a test of your skills, man. Remember that?
Yo, KRS-ONE and weighs a ton. Freak G son, and I'm a son of a gun. Black master of any trade under the sun. Talk chalk like razor blades under the tongue. Get up past the come, get your captain up. Trying to breathe like Chris, collapse your lung, young chump. You can choke from the web I spun. I done cleared them out, the threat I brought. You done heard about what said I'm from, my nigga. Word about new rule of thumb. Y'all better bow down, here the ruler come. I'm a legend in the hood, not a hoodlum. I thought, putting down confusing some of y'all. What a keyboard gotta do with a drum and all. Schooling on stage like I'm doing a seminar. Rocking on a mic, up in here with a women all. Me and Chris, and it goes like this. Black on a model Philly with the SP twist. Yeah, I'm saying in the place to the juggling bass. Put your hands up. Get your hands up, check it out, y'all.
Hip-hop is a new civilization because we've realized how to transcend the divisions in humanity. Race, ethnicity, class, religion. We figured out how to all come together. That's a civilization. We should never regard ourselves as just a music genre. Although that's powerful and positive, that's not all of who we are. We are a nation. We are a culture, a world culture. We are a civilization.
Hip-hop's true history cannot be properly documented without an understanding of hip-hop's true origins.
Who really knows what it is? And you start to realize who didn't know what it is. And then they try to make it cool to not know what it is. That's foul. That's self-destruction. Like, if you say, oh, it's cool, I don't know who them niggas is. Nah, stupid that is in music. Like Bob Dylan's never gonna say he don't know Muddy Waters, he don't know B.B. King, he don't know Johnny or whatever. Yeah. He's gonna be like, well, I got me music because when you listen to Donny Hathaway album at the end, he's like, what are you gonna do, Donny Hathaway, after you finish this tour? Well, I'm gonna go back to school and study music. Ooh. You ask another dude, if you say that, I'm like, this is the music industry. So the reason now cats don't excel that much is because they still thinking they catching on to something that's the thing that make money now. It's the hustle. So when I said hip-hop is dead, they don't even know what hip-hop is. Even some of these dudes with platinum records don't even know what hip-hop. I would be ashamed if I played rock and roll classical music and didn't know Mozart. They don't even know how stupid they look when they go, I don't know who that is. Who is Busy Bee? The fact that you don't go and learn means you're a fucking idiot.
Real talk.
I say 2, 4, 6, 8, 11, 12. If you with me, don't hesitate.
We're looking to have a presence where people know that there's a legitimate force out there that is ran by legitimate people about this culture. If you have questions about the culture and you want legitimate answers, not yo man, you know what I'm saying, but legitimate answers that you can go and print somewhere in a college journal about a culture, you need to come see the Temple of Hip Hop. We have certified specialists. Pee Wee Dance is a hip hop historian. He'll be here tonight. Hopefully we can get a little interview with him as well. Kool Herc, the father of hip hop, is our resident scholar as well.
As rap music became more commercialized and mainstream, we began forming our unique body of hip-hop knowledge with hip-hop's actual founders in an effort to preserve such knowledge for future hip-hop scholars. For most people, the very term hip-hop scholar was seen as a contradiction, but these are some of the earliest images of hip-hop's actual founders teaching the origins of hip-hop in a legitimate learning environment, again, for the first time.
Well, it started from myself. I was the first, hip-hop to me right now is like it's on the course of a relay. I was the first guy who started off with the baton. You know, I started off like that. And the origin, West Indian background. I was born in the West Indies, from Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. So it was an opportunity to go to London. My parents migrated from Jamaica to the States or London, so, you know, she chose the United States, and that's where, as far as where hip-hop could have started from, could have from the UK or Canada, but it started in New York, on the West Side, in the Bronx. And, but little did anybody know, myself know, it was going to have a form like this. It would have spread like a ripple in the river, from state to state and from country to country. And before we know it, hip-hop is for culture.
Listen, I tell you what I give. The mic is going off and on. Listen, kid. I used to sleep right on that bridge. See the people looking up there with their kids? See that shit there? That's called the Brooklyn Bridge over there. And that bridge is called the Manhattan. And that bridge there started my rapping. That's Queensbridge. And you know what it is. Let me take y'all back, all the way back. This is MCing, not rap. And while I'm rapping from heaven, oh, I ain't gonna say that about Hot 97. Now fuck it, let me continue to truck it. KRS-ONE trucks the bucket. Oh, let me come back. You right there, you recording all that? Let me talk to my kids in 2023 so they can really see an MC. That's your ancestors. Look at them. That's your ancestors.
The true fans of hip hop and the true pioneers, you know, and brothers that, you know, came from the whole genesis of the thing, you know. Because who the people that's organizing it right now are really like more or less the media and record company execs. You know, so therefore they're making it what they want it to be, and what they want it to be is what they know they can sell.
As the years rolled on and rap music became more corporate, many of us refused to allow all of hip-hop to be commercialized. This made us and our work underground.
Really, hip-hop has been existing for a long time on the underground level.
Being underground in the 1990s simply meant standing for something. Hip-hop is what entrepreneurial spirits flourished during these times.
And, you know, brothers used to come in and just buy the tapes as we was making them. We used to copy them as the parties was going on and sell them then. And then I played there for a year. After that, I started selling them on my own on the street corner. And they blew up.
As we became wiser, we realized that hip-hop is the only thing of value that we actually own. Collectively, hip-hop is actually ours. It is the only subject that we know to be actually true. Even though we might not know one another, we feel one another, and this is called culture.
Happened with 2 turntables in a mixer, man, and it just started to migrate. People just started to pick up the feeling. It was something that we weren't accepted at disco joints and popular places, so we had to just make our own culture, man. You know what I mean? It was hard times. It was just something that came out of just total freedom, man. You know what I mean? And just expressionist. You know what I mean? And just trying to make a negative into a positive. And look at it now, 30 years later, who would have known, right?
Long before anyone was thinking about hip-hop's actual preservation, or hip-hop as an educational tool, or hip-hop's spiritual power, or even its potential political power, serious hip-hop activists were meeting regularly to develop plans for hip-hop's actual preservation and further development. This is how and why people even know about hip-hop today. It is because of meetings like these in the early 1990s, where we would get together and ask the founders and pioneers of original hip-hop important questions such as, what in our minds is the most important aspect to preserving the culture of hip-hop?
It was given to me, they said, yo, keep it going, preserve this state of mind. That's what we're trying to get. And man, it's going to take a while to figure out what that state of mind is.
Yeah, I'm glad you said
But this is a whole new organization. I mean, it all stems from hip-hop, and we all know what BAM stands for: peace, unity, love, and having fun. Through economics and all that.
Yeah. You got to take hip-hop for what it is. You got to recognize that there's hip-hop, there's the electro funk, there's the go-go, there's the new jack swing, there's the gangster, what you call gangster rap, there's the sweet mellow like Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince. We got to take all the styles of hip-hop and recognize them all. We can't be having that bickering, oh, the hell with the West Coast, hell with down south, hell with New Orleans, Arrested Development, Hammer's not this, Hammer's not that. You know, we got to get away from foolishness because we are fighting for the minds of all our people throughout the world. We got to
We have to understand what it means when we do something. Like this brother said about his job. Now, if we're going to build, you know, what we're really doing is building a society, and part of society is what's wrong right now is we have no spirituality. So we have to bring spirituality back in effect. And once you have spirituality and you become strong within yourself, then you can define what is going to happen in your life.
Preserving hip hop, I mean, I believe is getting people to find esteem in hip hop. I've been teaching public schools for the last 4 years. And the one thing I noticed in teaching social studies is that the kids didn't see their immediate society as worth something studying. So things that I would do is I would say, okay, we're going to study hip hop. Hip hop is a society of people. You interact with one another. We're going to study the ways in which your society manifests itself. The dance, the music, the hairstyles, the clothes, the fashion. Then I flipped it and said, well, let's see who makes money off of it. And I started bringing magazines in. I bought the Word Up in and the Rap Masters. Then I bought the Source in and the Vibe. And as we got higher in levels of getting across messages, we saw where most money was going. I said, well, why is that? You know, we have to start seeing our community as something to have esteem in. In doing that, we define it.
Art needs to be seen. You know what I'm saying? We got to get back to the original cultural mentality of the whole art form. Once we get everybody culturally based, then we can move. But right now, we're not treating it as a culture. We're treating it as a commodity. And when you treat it as a commodity, you're going to lose it.
We got to have a whole accountable, disciplined order and the formulator union, and we got to put our money where our mouth is and be doers of the words.
Through his organization Zulu Nation, Africa Bambaataa would end many of the gang rivalries in New York and teach the combined principles of peace, love, unity, and safely having fun as the fundamental basis for the existence and practice of hip-hop, which also included knowledge and overstanding. With overstanding, hip-hop was able to further develop and give rise to Grandmaster Flash, who would manipulate the DJ mixer and turntable to introduce the arts of cutting and scratching in 1976.
This is where I came into the game. Now, with my science is, for every good record, there's a great part. So what I had to do is figure out a way to take this teeny tiny section where it only broke down for like maybe 30 seconds and extend it to 4, 5, 6 minutes. It took a lot of figuring out how needles work, how does a torque of a turntable work, the state of inertia to all the way up to speed, the type of needles, elliptical versus conical, the size, the grams, the tracking. Once I was able to figure all that out, I had to figure out a way to take this section and just repeat it over and over and over again. It was a 2-year period in my mother's house, straight from school or straight from work, and coming up with this science. And coming up with it, I'll never forget when I first displayed it in the parks, I said to myself, well, I'm playing the most climatic part of these records. So if I can figure out a way to just keep playing them one after another without you being able to tell, I'm going to have you going crazy. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So when I went up in the park and I tried this and I did this, the audience was doing exactly what you're doing. At that point in time, I felt quite discouraged. Let me tell you why. I'm saying to myself, I'm playing these passages of music. I'm going right to the meat of the sandwich, the break of this record to the break of this record, on time, one after another. And nobody's going berserk, nobody's going nuts. It's like no asses is wiggling. Any children in here? Hope not. Nobody's moving. To my dismay, I figured out that I needed some sort of vocal entertainment. God bless the dead Cowboy. I would have to say, my first MC, Cowboy, he probably was the one person who kept my spirits up. Because me doing this without the vocal entertainment, the MCing, I might have given up. I might have said, you know, I was hearing things like, what is this ridiculous fucking noise this guy's doing with these records? You know, I heard this record before, and why is it that he keeps going back to the same part over and over and over and over and over and over and over again? This guy, he's stupid, he's an idiot, he's like losing his mind, he's whatever. You know, once myself and Cowboy came up with a science, because he was like a ringmaster, or a Simon Says type of person. He was able to get people to be occupied. He was like the guy that would just get people off of me, which is what I needed. And once that happened, it was on. From there, I started going into clubs, and I'll just end it here. When I go into a long story, I would go to the clubs and ask DJs, can I get on for 4 or 5 minutes? These jocks would be like, you know, the fuck out of here, you know? You're gonna scratch up the records. When in actuality, when you are queuing, you are scratching the record back anyway. The only difference is you just pushing it out to the people, so their ignorance was their problem. But it wasn't until I met a gentleman by the name of DJ Hollywood in Club 371. He let me get on. And then I went to a club called Disco Fever, and there was a fella by the name of Junebug. He let me on. So the other clubs, eventually, they had to let me on because people wanted to see that. And that's what my contribution to this game is. Thank you.
When Love Bug Starsky, Chief Rock the Busy Bee, and others like Keith Cowboy from the Furious Five began to popularize the word hip-hop in the late 1970s, everyone knew what they were talking about. No one had to explain what hip-hop was because we were all it. The language, the clothing, the jewelry, the music, the art, the dances, all of it was us. It was who we were as a people. None of this needed to be explained. It was all felt.
Hip-hop as a culture is a beautiful thing that was created from nothing. You know, it was like, we gonna give you nothing, and the ghetto just said, well, we're gonna appreciate what we can do. You know, we can dance, and we're gonna make them kids into heroes. You know, we can paint on the wall, and we're gonna make these kids into heroes. And we started to create our own stars. The media didn't accept us, but we made our own stars. You were like stars in the neighborhood. And the only other way to get a star in the neighborhood at that time was be in a gang. Be so negative that you became a star. But hip hop was like a positive way to be a star. You know, if you were the best breakdancer, you had fans. You know, even if it's only from your own projects. You know, if you were a good DJ, you had fans. You could say, hey, I'm gonna be in this one place, and people will come.
All there is to see, I'm called to go back to the essence. It's a lot to learn, so I study my lesson. I thought the ghetto was the worst that could happen to me. I'm glad I listened when my father was rapping to me, cause back in the days they lived in caves. Exile from the original land of slavery. That is what I call hard town. I'd rather be here to exercise the mind and not take the thought around the world twice. Now it's pull back out of the sight. Across the desert, that's how the Arabian. They couldn't cave me in, cause I'm the alien. We can pull a city up back and visit Medina. This is the next city, then I've seen her. I keep traveling, I'll be back after I stop and think about the brothers and sisters in Africa. Return the Lord through the eye of a nigga for miles I fought and I just took under the dark skies, on the dark side, down over there, but right here is a park now. Now where's the time for us to react? Take a trip through the mind, wait to get back. Understand your third eye, see all of that. It ain't where you from.
When hip-hop was being done for fun and popularity, young street poets began organizing themselves into DJ and MCing crews. One such crew, called the Cold Crush Brothers, were among the first to vocalize hip-hop's culture, introducing the art of MCing, and presented some of the first rap lyrics ever into hip-hop.
to me. I've had my eyes on you from before I see. Don't know if you go through that door. You can not do my job. Before the night is over, I want you in my arms.
From 1973 to 1979, hip-hop was practiced as a way of life. Breaking, MCing, aerosol art, and DJing were done to enhance one's peace, love, unity, and joy. But in 1979, hip-hop's culture split when Grandmaster Caz's manager, Big Bank Hank, recited Caz's rhymes for his part in the now classic song, Rapper's Delight. Grandmaster Caz puts it this way.
Basically, Hank, I met Hank at the club he was bouncing at, Sparkle, hip-hop club in the Bronx. And I used to go there and see other hip-hop acts there when I wasn't performing. And me and Hank was kicking at the door. This was at a time when a guy named Ray Chandler, who was like managing Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Fives, he was getting them booked in every high school around the city. He was getting them booked in clubs and this and that, and I didn't have nobody representing my crew. I didn't have nobody that could go in somewhere and say, well, listen, look, I represent so-and-so, and we want, you know, this and that. So I thought Hank could be that dude for me, you know, because just from our conversations we had at the door. So he became like acting manager for my group. So he took out a loan, $2,000 from his parents, okay? And to buy us more equipment, bigger equipment, got bigger speakers made, and bought amps and stuff like that for the crew. Because hip hop was still in that stage at the time. It was still, when you had a party, you brought your whole set.
You had to have your own equipment.
Right, you had to have your own equipment. It didn't happen until later people start playing on other people's sets. So we wasn't gonna make no payback, no $2,000 loan on no hip hop jams. Right. You know, it wasn't happening. Right. We wasn't getting that kind of money. So Hank got a job in a pizza shop in New Jersey. The people from Sugar Hill or whatever, her sons and stuff, they looking for people to get on this record that their mom is starting to, she's gonna make a record. He goes out in the pizza shop, he got dough on him and all that, he get in the car and he starts saying my rhymes and stuff to the dude in the car, Joey Robinson, right? So they like, okay, hey, you're down. So Hank passes the audition, whatever, okay? Comes to me later on, he's like, yo, Kaz, listen, these people want me to make a record. I'm like, what? A record for what? What, you know? Yo, this lady, she's you know, starting a label, and she want to make a rap record, and she got 2 guys, and she, you know, she want me to be the third. She want to be 3 of them. And I'm like, what? You don't even MC. You don't rap. What you gonna do? He was like, well, yo, I'm gonna say some of your rhymes. So
that's why I say here it comes.
So I'm like, first of all, anybody who would make a record and ask him to be on it, it can't be nobody in their right mind, all right? It can't be no real record. It can't really be going nowhere, okay? And then my second thought is, well, why you didn't tell him about me? You my manager. If somebody wants you to make a record and you my manager, you won't get in the car and start saying my stuff. 2 months later, now this is the boombox days. This is when everybody walking down the street got a big ass radio on their shoulder, okay? Every station you turn on was playing Rapper's Delight, was playing this song. Now me, I don't got people around me saying, yo, you need a lawyer. You need to go do this and that. There's copyright, this and that. There's a royalty, there's this. Nobody around me knew nothing like that. We wasn't in the industry. We was in hip hop. We wasn't in the music business. And I
still waiting.
No, I'm not even waiting. I'm not waiting for nothing from them because mine is gonna come from me deserving it. That's what I feel like.
It was the very success of rap music that made anyone believe that they too could be a rapper, a breaker, a graffiti writer, or a DJ simply by hearing or looking at what hip-hop's original architects were doing and mimicking them.
And another thing about it is you could study hip hop right now and still meet the people who made history. All these people aren't dead. You can meet philosophers like Nas. You can meet philosophers like KRS-ONE. You can talk to Ice Cube. We're still walking around and breathing.
Alright, bring it in. Right here. Do you know where Say Ho comes from? Do you know where Oh Yeah comes from? Where Throw Your Hands in the Air comes from? Do you know who invented the scratch? You don't know, but you using all that and abusing the fact that you be using our raps and redoing our tracks and telling us our music is whack. I would never treat those that came before me like that, cause if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for the Keith Cowboy, I recognize the fact that if it wasn't for the treacherous three, I recognize the fact that if it wasn't for DJ Red Alert, I recognize the fact that if it wasn't for the Scott LaRock, I recognize the fact that whack rap holds the whole crew back, cause everybody's stealing. You take one step, they pulling you back, wheeling and dealing. But we already been through that, we know the feeling, y'all. But when you diss your foundation, you really fall, cause you too are getting older, not younger. You got to hear me, y'all. Yes, indeed. Did you get to see that? That was nice. That was absolutely. Actually, you know, I took another look at it again and didn't realize how informative that actually was. A very rare piece of footage about hip hop. And as you can see, the origins of hip hop, it was done many years ago. It's sort of like that was one of the beginnings of us trying to convince the hip hop community that it was a culture. Everyone did not agree. Like you know, we say we teach this all the time that when we first started saying rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live, everyone did not agree. It was the people that you saw in that documentary that were also pushing the idea of culture, of hip hop as more than just music, but also philosophy, culture, lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the origins of hip hop. And I don't know if you noticed, I don't know if you saw it, but in the rhyme, in that early part of the rhyme, where it said, I'm talking to my kids in 2023. Word? I'm going back, I'm thinking about when we actually did that rhyme. It was in the new millennium. It was in 2000. It was like maybe like 2008 or 2005 or something like that. It was right around that kind of time. And I'm talking about, because I'm looking at the camera, and you hear me say that rhyme, not that particular one, but that inflection all the time. I'm talking to my kids in 2053. I'm talking to my kids in this kind of, whatever it is in the future, showing people actually, which we just showed in this particular film, that you have to give yourself great memories. You are in control of the history that you are going to live. And this is what we're going to begin to talk about today, the origins of hip hop. Because to even understand the origins of hip hop, you have to raise your consciousness to a more expansive idea about what time is and your place in it. So you look at this and you say, what kind of memories am I giving myself? And I look back when I saw the origins of hip hop. Of course, I remember V&A was Brooklyn. We was ripping Brooklyn down that day. But I was obviously in some sort of a prophetic mode too, because here I am now, 2023. And it was, I didn't say no other age. I didn't say no other year. I said that year, 2023. And here we are now, 2023. Next year, it'll be outdated. 2024, that rhyme won't matter anymore. It'll be old now. You'll say, wow, we even passed 2023. And if you don't know what year I'm actually rhyming in, 20 years from now, you'll think I was rhyming in 2023. Or they'll say, well, why is he rhyme? Why did he say I was talking to my kids in 2023? If you don't really understand the culture or understand that I was actually in like 2003 or 2005 or something, if you don't understand all that, what are you really looking at? And this is how we got to look at history itself. This is how we have to look at history. This is how we have to look at how we think of ourselves within history. Because history has a lot to do with how you think about yourself. And if you don't have an understanding as to what history actually is, these people will lead you down a road that you'll realize late in life, wow, I could have made history. Instead, I was told my history. I could have made my history, but I was told my history. I could have gave myself great memories, but I gave myself horrible memories. And how do you do that? With the actions of your own life, with the actions of your own life in the present. This is why it's always best to live a conscious, righteous life. Live according to principle. Because what happens? When you live according to principle, say the divine performance, for instance, when you live according to principle, years later on, you give yourself great memories. Living like some crazy in the street with no sense of morality, no sense of responsibility, unreliable, angry all the time. What are you doing? You're actually giving yourself in that present moment anger, present anger, doubt, guilt, fear, this and that. You're giving yourself those as memories. And so later on in life, when you look back at your memories and say, yo, this is what I remember of myself, you can't think good about yourself. You can't feel good about the memories that you gave yourself. Some of the harmful things you might have done or said to somebody else gave you a terrible memory about it. So you got to be conscious about how you conduct yourself in the present, because it's the present that's making your history. The history you gonna live, the history our kids gonna live, or your children, my children gonna live. What kind of legacy are we actually creating for them? Because remember, your actions also are creating the actual history and heritage of those who are to come after you. So what kind of heritage are you leaving those who are to come after you as well? This is why a lot of people, they don't even want to dig into their past. They don't even want to know who their ancestors were, because they fear that if they dig them up, something crazy going to come up and they got to live with that too now. But once you realize that the way time works, the way history works, the way generation and then generation and then generation works, the way that works is you are the latest version of whatever history you have. Whatever you believe your history to be, whatever you believe it to be, you are the latest version of that history. You could go right or left. It don't matter if your people were great people in life, they did the greatest whatever. You are the latest version of that greatness. You could throw it away or you could progress on it. A lot of people who are offspring of greatness throw their greatness away. Very few actually pick up their legacy and move forward with it, or their heritage, or, this kind of thing. Very few continue the greatness of their ancestors or their parents even. You have others who had a horrible, leaving their kids, I don't have to dwell on it, but, the flip side of it is that you had a great legacy. You couldn't continue it. The other side, you had a horrible legacy, but you were the latest version of it, so you corrected it. You dug up your legacy and you realize your parents were involved in some hideous crime against humanity. You're the latest version of that. The latest one, the great-grandson or daughter, the great-great-great-grandson. What do? You sit there dwelling in guilt, giving up inspirational living towards yourself, sitting there guilty? Or do you grab hold of yourself and say, I am the latest version of this story, and here's how the story's gonna go. Yes, it was this, but I'm the latest version of this. So now we're gonna turn it and steer it over here to this. And that's going on all over the world, actually. People are taking their what is perceived to be controversial past or undesirable ancestry and becoming the latest version of the correction of it. This is natural too. Nature takes the best of both parents and makes the child. And just leave that nonsense behind. You don't criticize it. You just take the best part of your ancestors and make something greater. Move forward. Progress the development of you. So we're going to discuss history. Now, I've been putting an emphasis on history through this whole reading, really, especially coming up on toward our last two pieces, 17 and 18, the 17th and 18th overstanding. I've been putting an emphasis on on history. I read a portion of of Black Oustery within this read because we got to a point where we was discussing history. And this is very important. It's very important that you get this. Because once you can open your mind as to what history actually is, then you'll know how to conduct yourself in the present. You'll know what it means. You'll know what the past actually means, what the future actually means. You can govern and manage your life, not just random movements and you don't know why you did what you did. You're not hip to your hop. But being hip to your hop, managing your time wisely, managing your memories wisely, empowering yourself with disciplines that empower yourself. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Gospel of Hip Hop. I'm actually on page 708, the 18th overstanding, the origins of hip hop. So I'm gonna clean my reading glasses off here. 708, and we're gonna start with track 1. Take a look at that. Yes, I think that's good. Let's get right down to it. By the way, let me start off like this. Of course, you know the Temple of Hip Hop is a hip hop preservation ministry, archive, school, and society. We began in 1996 with the slogan, the affirmation, rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live. I realized that I was hip hop in 1994 and I declared it. I am hip hop. And from that movement forward, I became hip to my hop. And so we're moving forward as a temple for hip hop because we are a sacred space within hip hop. We are the preservation of hip hop's original idea. And that's us, the Temple of Hip Hop. We're reading our Gospel of Hip Hop because we are training ourselves to be teachers of this craft. We're training ourselves to be hip hop cultural specialists. We are going to teach teachers how to teach hip hop. We are also unified in the language of our gospel. We hold the legal documents that make hip hop a culture. Not only the proclamations from a variety of government agencies in the United States, religious organizations in the United States, of course, you know, UNESCO and a variety of their NGOs as well, but most importantly, hip-hop's actual founders, creators, innovators, pioneers themselves. we hold this information and it's sacred to us. And because of that sacredness, we call ourselves a temple for hip hop, the temple of hip hop. This is hip hop's sacred space. This is the space that can't be bought. This is the space that doesn't lie, doesn't cheat, doesn't steal. This is the space that comforts, cares. Charity is in this space. Respect is in this space. Forgiveness, mercy is in this space. Grace is in this space. And so realize where you are. This is the temple of hip hop. So I'm on 708 right now, and we're reading from, we're reading the 18th Overstanding, The Origins of Hip Hop. You just saw the film and the prophetic rhyme within it. Let's get to this now. Track 1. Peace and much love to all generations of hip hop. It is here at the end that we explore our beginnings, our origin. However, before exploring the origins of hip hop, let us be clear about the subject we are about to explore. Not only are we exploring the possibility and opportunity to establish hip hop as a free and sovereign nation, we are also exploring the origins of hip hop in an effort to properly document its real history. Now notice this part right here. Not only are we exploring the possibility and opportunity to establish hip hop as a free and sovereign nation, we are also exploring the origins of hip hop in an effort to properly document its real history. Sovereignty, history. We're creating nation. One of the reasons this overstanding appears at the end of this first instrument, and that's the other name for the gospel of hip hop, the first instrument. One of the reasons, excuse me, this overstanding appears at the end of this first instrument is because such an inquiry requires a certain maturity and openness of mind to fully comprehend. It is not at all my intent to insult, disrespect, or demean anyone or any other school of thought regarding such a subject. However, I invite our truly free-thinking hip-hoppers to seriously consider the following overstanding as a real solution and strategy toward the preservation and further development of our already growing hip-hop community. First, this overstanding argues that hip-hop's true history cannot be properly documented without an understanding of hip-hop's true origins. Study carefully. The origin of something is its origination, its cause, where it came from, how it came into existence. Different from history, the origin of something deals with the nature and being of a thing. It explores the actual conditions that help to bring a thing into existence. In short, hip-hop's origins are indeed hip-hop's true historical ingredients. Without an origin, there is no history. Yes, there are some very good hip-hop history books available today, written by some very credible hip-hop authors. However, I find it a bit funny how so many rap and hip-hop writers in my time can discuss the writing of hip-hop's history without first discussing the origin of hip-hop's existence, its cause and its effects, its essence and nature in material reality. It's because they're not even going that far. I'm writing in a time, this is of course before 2009, so we're still dealing with hip-hop as really a music genre and very young driven and, you know, this kind of thing. Not taking it seriously. In addition, and the history of hip-hop in those times reflect that. You'll see it if you go back and get some of the early books, the history of hip-hop, this history of hip-hop, so on and so on. You'll see the angle by which they're coming from. A lot of record sales are determining who's getting put in history. And the level of sales is determining how much we're going to write about them in the history. And of course, the other elements, graffiti writing, even b-boy breaking, so on, just non-existent. And this is why I say, I find it a bit funny how so many rap and hip-hop writers in my time can discuss the writing of hip-hop's history without first discussing the origins of hip-hop's existence, its causes and its effects, its essence and nature in material reality. In addition, many of the hip-hop history books for sale on the market today speak as if the whole of the hip-hop community agrees with the conclusions and interpretations such books depict of our life experiences. Like they're writing about us and then using the book to say that what we're saying is not real or true about us. What a weird experience that is when you could see yourself in books and then the author claims to know more about you than you know about yourself, or more about what you're doing than you know than what you're doing. And why? Because he wrote a book. And, you know, it's not even so much that this is not going on so much today because a lot of us have written books now and have written, but I'm writing from a time where a lot of rappers didn't have books out. Remember, this idea of even a rapper writing a book was not even taken seriously. To this, now every other month another rapper drops a book, and we need that. You know, that's always great, but not in this time. In this time, you had a certain sect of journalists that were bent on hip hop being a music genre and the highest selling rapper being the lead for hip hop, or its voice, or its lead image. I don't know what they were thinking, but this is what we were up against. And I'm actually writing about it now because these same journalists were not historians. No historian is writing about hip hop's history. These are all journalists and music executives and so on writing about hip hop's history. In addition, let me just read it again. In addition, many of the hip-hop history books books on sale on the market today speak as if the whole of the hip-hop community agrees with the conclusions and interpretations such books depict about our life experiences. Many of these books are rushed out with little to no real scholarship, and I often wonder what the rush is all about to publish a history of hip-hop in my time. In my humble opinion, as true hip-hop scholars, we cannot even discuss hip-hop's history without first discussing hip-hop's origins. And from that solid understanding of hip-hop's true nature and existence, we may set a collective agenda that establishes our survival and collective well-being in the world. Our agenda births our history. Let's underline that. Let's go ahead and underline that. That's going to be paragraph 7. And actually, why don't we go ahead and get 8, 7 and 8. Underline paragraphs or highlight paragraphs 7 and 8. Okay? Let me show you why. Let me hit you with 7 one more time, and I'm going to go right into 8. In my humble opinion, as true hip-hop scholars, we cannot even discuss hip-hop's history without first discussing hip-hop's origins. And from that solid understanding of hip-hop's true nature and existence, we may set a collective agenda that establishes our survival and collective well-being in the world. Our agenda births our history. The documentation of our collective effort to reach our collective agenda is called our history. Our effort to get to our goal is called our history. Our movement as a community through time and space is our history. Our history, or rather our story, develops naturally from the pursuit of our own collective agenda, rooted in an awareness of our own existence. Our own agenda, rooted in our own existence, and us moving forward toward that is creating a history. It's creating events. It's creating what's really going on. Hip-hop's history is not the history of rap music pioneers and DJs. This is a distinction that had to be said. It had to be written. It has to be taught. And it still has to be taught, actually, because too many people still, scholars, professors, are still taking their cue their cue for hip hop's history is still rappers and DJs. They'll never start with, say, fashion, street fashion, which has just as much acclaim or start in hip hop as any of the other elements, rapping, MCing, DJing, cutting, mixing, scratching. They'll never start with graffiti writing or anything, none of that, because they don't know it. So you can only write history according to what you know and what you are experiencing and how broad your understanding is of the subject matter. And like I said, hip-hop's history has been written by journalists, not by true historians, and not even by true hip-hop historians. So what are we really dealing with? We're dealing with fake histories, and not fake like fraudulent, fake like useless, fake like hollow, counterfeit. And now you're getting into fraudulent. But that's the point. That's the point. These histories don't mean anything. They don't do anything for you. They're not telling you about you and the heritage that you are part of. This is the difference. Let's read on. But this is the challenge right here. Many so-called hip-hop scholars and or hip-hop historians in my time don't even believe that hip-hop exists as an international culture. They are still approaching hip-hop as music, art, and clothing fashions exclusively. This begins our study into hip-hop's origins because the desperate attempts of many rap journalists to make a name for themselves at the expense of accurate hip-hop documentation is also part of hip-hop's true history, and future hip-hoppers should know of this. Study carefully. What is being sold as hip-hop's history in my time, your past, is actually rap music's folklore. So again, different from a history of something or someone, an origin explores the conditions that created that something or someone. It explores the nature of historical people, places, and things. We can read all day about the history of hip-hop, but if we don't know why things are the way that they are and how they got to be that way, our historical view of hip-hop will always be the interpretations of those who sought only to exploit hip-hop and not be or learn hip-hop. As Cicero pointed out, quote, not to have knowledge of what happened before you, not to have knowledge of what happened before you were born is to be condemned to live forever as a child, end quote. As a teacher, a true hip-hop scholar, you must know the difference between the work of a true hip-hop scholar different from that of an objective freelance writer only seeking to make some money on his or her story, or some music executive turned historian only seeking to keep his or her name alive. Again, this too is part of hip-hop's true history. As a true hip-hop scholar, you must know of the conditions that help to create hip-hop so that you will really know how to preserve it and further develop it. The first thing to realize about hip-hop is that the main reason why hip-hop's history is presented in the way that it is, told through the events of the rap music industry, is because between the years of 1983 and 2003, the selling of rap music magazines was where the money was at. Unfortunately, rap magazines were also the very first documentation of hip-hop as a subculture, even to other hip-hoppers. From the first time people became aware of hip-hop's artistic elements, the idea was to use hip-hop, not understand hip-hop. When rap music first hit the mainstream American airwaves in 1979, everyone approached it, hip-hop, as if it was something to eat, rappers included. No one cared about how the rapper MC viewed the world or why rappers did what they did. Most people were only eager to learn how we did what we did so that they can do it as well to make some money. The honoring of real artistic and intellectual skill The documentation of hip-hop's political advancements, as well as the words and warnings of hip-hop's prophets, scholars, pioneers, cultural principles, were all deliberately ignored so that hip-hop's artistic elements, mainly DJing and MCing, could be exploited by mainstream corporate interests. That's what happened. This is how hip-hop treated hip-hop when hip-hop gained mainstream acceptance. And notice the spellings here. This is how lowercase hip-hop treated uppercase hip-hop when lowercase hip-hop gained mainstream acceptance. This is why hip-hop looks the way that it does in my time, 2009, historically. You, my future, can see this fact a lot clearer in your time than the many who cannot seem to see this obvious fact in my time. All across America's mainstream airwaves, hip-hop is being presented to the world as an irresponsible community of bitches, thugs, whores, and pimps. And this is done deliberately for the sole purpose of generating an income while distracting people from the truth. In my present time, 2009, your past. This is a condition of hip-hop. And it is this present condition. And notice this too, I'm talking from the past to the future. This is a technique that you have to be able to understand when writing generationally. I know that the writings that I'm putting into this book right here is actually going to be read now in 2023. And that's what I said about the origins of hip-hop, the actual movie. That rhyme, of course, I was freestyling in 2023, just blurted out my mouth. But wow, what a soul that was that day. Because here I am now, 2023, and I had no idea also when I said that 2023 would be the 50th anniversary of hip-hop. I was not thinking that when I said that rhyme. It just came out my mouth. Now we get to 2023, it's the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, and I'm actually finishing the origins of hip-hop, same name as the film, I'm finishing up the reading of the Gospel of hip-hop with the origins of hip-hop. Having said in the film origins of hip-hop, I'll be talking to my kids, meaning everybody really, including my own children, in 2023. And I'm saying these are your ancestors. I'm pointing to the crowd. These are your ancestors. Look at this. In my present time, 2009, your past. This is a condition of hip-hop. And it is this present condition that is a major part of hip-hop's origin. Again, I am in no way disrespecting or demeaning the work of others. Not at all. We are all growing and developing with the conscious awareness that we possess. There is no personal judgment here. However, these are the things that you must know in order to be a true scholar of hip-hop's real history. You must have a special sight capable of differentiating between truth and bullshit. As a true hip-hop historian, you must know that there are those of us who remain committed to the principles of peace, love, unity, and safely having fun, as laid down by Africa Bambaataa. And there are others who continuously seek to subvert, demean, degrade, and even disrespect hip-hop and its principles in their own desperate attempt to acquire more and more financial security. This is just a fact of my time, and this is also part of hip-hop's true history. Sometime around 1991, with the rise of televised videos, everyone and anyone felt that they could rap. Anyone and everyone felt that they could rap, and they did. The so-called fans of real DJs and MCs became mainstream rappers, executives, and journalists themselves, expressing the interests of mainstream corporate America within hip-hop. Without knowing it, their desperate acts served as agents of our continued oppression. This fact is also a major part of hip-hop's true history. Hip-hop's true history begins with hip-hop's real relationship with itself. Before we can really document hip-hop historically, we must first intimately know and accurately describe the true nature of what we are seeking to document historically. Otherwise, we are only documenting our personal opinions and emotions regarding hip-hop into history, and this too is part of hip-hop's true history. Matter of fact, you know what? Let's highlight that. Highlight 22. Go ahead and highlight 22. That's an interesting part to remember about the documentation of hip-hop's history, because what we're doing is we're entering a new way to even look at the past. You can't assume that the way to look at hip-hop's past is the way to look at American history's past, or even African American history's past. There are different methodologies and different techniques for the interpretation of the past based on the culture or the subject by which you're talking about. We're going to get into that as well, but I want to begin to pull that lesson out, and it starts right here with 22. Hip-hop's true history begins with hip-hop's true relationship with itself. Not a record sale, not what's going on in the rest in the world, but what is hip-hop even in the world? What is this relationship to itself? This is the beginning of its history. Once we establish what hip-hop's relationship is to itself, then from that core, we can determine what its relationship is to everything else and everyone else's relationship to it. But if hip-hop doesn't know to itself its own value, its own existence, and its own value, its own existence, how it relates to itself, how we relate to each other, then we're not going to be able to really see the history we need to see. And to not be able to see the history you need to see, it distorts the future you'll be able to make. Paragraph 23. But this is the problem with documenting hip-hop for money as a job. The problem is objectivity. When you are actually hip-hop yourself, you instinctively look out for hip-hop first, above your employment status, and such an attitude is reflected in your writings. When you are actually hip-hop yourself, you instinctively look to protect the long-term interests of hip-hop and its international community. You write with the well-being of hip-hop's community in mind. Let's highlight that as well. In fact, yeah, this whole piece, let's go ahead and highlight all the way down. We're going to get, you know what? Let's go ahead and get 22 all the way to 27. That's one thought. Highlight 22 all the way to 27. And here's why. I'll read it to you right now. Here's why. Let me read 23 again. But this is the problem. Matter of fact, no, I'm gonna read 22 and let me read 22 to 27 again. This is very important to get. 22. Paragraph 22. Hip-hop's true history begins with hip-hop's true relationship with itself. Before we can really document hip-hop historically, we must first intimately know and accurately describe the true nature of what we are seeking to document historically. Otherwise, we are only documenting our personal opinions and emotions regarding hip-hop into history. And this, too, is part of hip-hop's true history. But this is the problem with documenting hip-hop for money as a job. The problem is objectivity. When you are actually hip-hop yourself, you instinctively look out for hip-hop first. Above your employment status, and such an attitude is reflected in your writings. We're still highlighting, here's 24. When you are actually hip-hop yourself, you instinctively look to protect the long-term interests of hip-hop and its international community. You write with the well-being of hip-hop's community in mind. When you are actually hip-hop yourself, no one has to pay you to participate in what you already are or to participate in what you already love and respect. As a loyal citizen of the hip-hop community, you love what you are writing about and or doing in hip-hop. As a citizen of the real hip-hop community, you care more for the image of hip-hop worldwide above your employment status. You have no choice but to document, further invent, preserve, promote, and participate in all of hip-hop, in all of what hip-hop has to offer. You are drawn to it. As a loyal citizen of hip-hop's global culture, you are not focused exclusively upon where hip-hop's valued resources are. As a true hip-hopper, you are exploring all of that which you truly love about hip-hop, regardless of compensation. Basically, you are exploring yourself and your role in that ever-growing reality we call hip-hop. Now that's the positive of that. That's a true hip-hopper. And that needs to be recognized right there. And that's the spirit of someone writing about hip-hop. You are hip-hop. Now that doesn't mean you're going to be biased and hide the darker parts or the questionable pieces of hip-hop. No, we're not doing that. But we are writing from the reality of what hip-hop is, and that's good. The core of what hip-hop is good. It's not evil, bad, wrong, worse. Let me read this part. This is the other side now. However, if you are not really a citizen of hip-hop's real community, yet you are attempting to document and or perform hip-hop's arts, sciences, and or culture, your perspective will always be objective. And approaching hip-hop objectively dramatically limits one's intimate understanding of hip-hop. The true hip-hop historian is subjective with the ability to hypothesize objectively. The true hip-hop historian loves hip-hop. Therefore, she is intimately immersed in it. There is no standing on the outside looking in when it comes to the hip-hop historian, scholar. The true hip-hop historian is hip-hop itself. To be a scholar of hip-hop, to be a scholar of hip-hop's arts and sciences, you must ultimately become. Okay, I see what's going on. Sorry about that. The noise over here. To become a hip-hop arts, to become a scholar of hip-hop's arts and sciences, you must ultimately become hip-hop's arts and sciences. Objectivity has its place, but as an exclusive method for the documentation of hip-hop, objectivity just does not go far enough into the actual nature of hip-hop. Most journalists educated in America's colleges today are taught that accuracy in the documenting of an event is based upon one's objective approach to that event. They are taught to remove themselves from what they are documenting so that they can get an unbiased perspective of the event. The premise is that the truly objective critic is fairer and more balanced in her interpretations of natural phenomenon than the one actually creating the phenomenon, because the objective observer is removed from what she is observing. There is no bias. The challenge, however, is that no one these days approaches anything objectively without prejudice or emotional response. And when it comes to hip-hop, you cannot understand it by watching it. You have to do it, be it, live it. Then maybe you'll begin to understand it. Objective truth does not exist for hip-hop. Hip-hop's historical reality is inherently enigmatic. This thing is on you, in you. The objectivism of today's journalists implies that knowledge or knowing is based upon observing objects and events as opposed to also being them. Objective journalists have been educated to believe that they can look at something and know what it is. Objectivity, however, does not really exist in the human experience, and it is a grossly inaccurate way of approaching an event as personal as hip-hop. To truly understand hip-hop, you have to become it. Still, even within the accepted methodology of methodology of objectively documenting a subject and or object, early rap magazine book writers still followed none of the academically accepted rules for the correct documentation of historical events. For the objective historian, history, and go back for a minute. I stumbled over that. Let me read this to you one more time, because this is what I mean about hip-hop's early history was not even documented by real historians following some sort of historical principle. These were journalists looking to make a fast buck on a story. And I say that respectfully, but this is what it was. Still, even within the accepted methodology of objectively documenting a subject and or object, early rap magazine book writers still followed none of the academically accepted rules for the correct documentation of historical events. Now we go through the rules. For the objective historian, history is based upon credible sources. Now, this is if you're even documenting history objectively, okay? For the objective historian, history is based upon credible sources. It has to be, because the objective historian is not the creator of the event she is preparing to document. What is called hip-hop's history today is mostly the creation of objective music critics interpreting the activities of the urban rap landscape and its people like products to be bought and sold. As the so-called standard goes, there are two main kinds of historical sources. One kind of source is called a primary source, and the other kind of source is called a secondary source. A primary source is evidence from the period you are studying, a newspaper article from the period, an archaeological find from the period, an originating person, place, or thing from the period. The primary source is the origin of something or someone's history. If your primary source is not correct, neither will your historical facts be correct. A secondary source is some already documented information about the originating period, person, place, or thing. A book or statement by another historian about the period, place, person, place, or thing in question. All histories rely upon primary and secondary sources, meaning that anytime you are presenting a history of something or someone, you will rely at some point upon secondary sources to substantiate your total point of view, because no one's history exists on its own, and most historians were not present for the history that they are now exploring. But what if your activities in time and physical space create a seemingly new event in time and physical space? Wait a minute, sorry about that. Let me hit that again. But what if your activities in time and physical space create a seemingly new event in time and physical space, and you are the primary source yourself? This slightly alters the concept of primary and secondary source materials, because even a newspaper article of an event from the actual period being studied, for example, which would be considered a primary source, can be questioned by the creators of the event if the article was written by an objective observer of the event. Meaning that if you're an objective observer writing about what I'm doing, your writings have no authority over me telling you what I'm doing. If the author journalist of the time who wrote such an article was still foreign and objective to the event being documented, I would argue that in the face of those who created and originated such an event, in no way can that historian's writings be called a primary source. Such writings are called a primary source to all who are not originators of the event or source, but for those who originate their events, they are the primary sources. Primary sources in historical documentation are only primary if the originator of the event is presenting his or her own story, his or her own self, in his or her own way. Just because you have a primary source in writing or in some other state of preservation does not mean that it is a primary source in physical reality. It is only a primary source to you because that's how far your research and mental abilities have gone, your abilities can go or have gone. However, to those who have created the event themselves, an outsider observing and then documenting that event can never claim any historical authority or accuracy over those who are the event itself. This is where the standard methodologies of documenting history come into question when documenting hip-hop. Traditionally, history is taught as cause, consequence, change, and continuity. But all of these methods are affected first by the intelligence, expertise, and personal prejudices of the historian. What is the cause of an event seen through the eyes of those only looking to exploit the event itself? True hip-hop historians must ask these questions of all cultures being studied within a mainstream context or within a colonial environment. The question is, how reliable is the primary source information of historians whose main motivation for documenting the event or the person is or was to exploit the event and or the person for whatever financial gain they may achieve with the documentation they've objectively obtained? Their own desire to exploit the situation blinds them from what actually caused the situation or what possible effects the situation may bring. Their aim is not history, it's money. And this is how hip-hop's history was documented from its earliest point. This was this is the intent that came to us. It wasn't, we're gonna document your history. It's, we wanna make some money on the name history with you. Because you're so vibrant and going on, let's just make a history for you so that we can make some money on it. But you're not really interested in our real history. Because if you was really interested in our real history, you would have wrote down that part when we told you, get the fuck out of our faces. You didn't write that part because that doesn't work for the history you want. Everybody in hip-hop told them, pay me for my interview. But journalists didn't want to do that and put it on us, saying we gonna make you popular by taking this interview. And then of course ego set in for a lot of rappers, and they wanted to be on the cover of the magazine. So once one sells out, then two sells out, then three. Now this is what the standard now becomes. So the question is, and I want to read this again. The question is, how reliable is the primary source information of historians whose main motivation for documenting the event or the person is or was to exploit the event and or the person for whatever financial gain they may achieve with the documentation they've objectively obtained? So you're not even the subject. You're objectively taking information. You're objectively taking information, and only for money. You're not even like say I'm a real historian and I'm approaching this objectively. We're not even getting that. You're just looking, taking what you think is valuable. You're not even teaching yourself about the culture. Like I'll give you an example. A lot of these journalists from the 80s and 90s and early crack of the new millennium, they don't know any more about hip-hop today than when they first started. They never educated themselves about hip-hop. They only took from it. And you could see within their level of education Sure, you could rattle off the names of this, and this, and only top-selling rappers or those who are cool to know. You could rattle off names. There's a lot of name dropping. But to tell us something about our culture that is going to empower us, empower those who actually participate in the culture, tell me something, give me a bit of information that's really going to move me forward. You are a writer. You've been writing about hip-hop for 30 years, let's say, or 20 years, or 10 years. You've been writing about hip-hop. You've been filming hip-hop. You've been recording this for 30 years. What can you tell me that is empowering? Show me your, what did you learn over 30 years? What did you do with that learning? Can we see evidence of how you progressed and advanced within hip hop over these 30 years? And you'll suddenly begin to see that nobody can answer that question, because the intent was never to learn about hip hop. It was never to unite with hip hop. It was always to take and use hip hop. Get something from it. And that's how they wrote. That's how they wrote about the history. The history was not even a history. It was journalists trying to pick out the most exciting gossip and write about it so they could sell a story. This is what we are now saying is hip-hop's history. This is why there's so much argument about the origins of hip-hop, about where hip-hop comes from, about who did what and who did why. I mean, with all due respect, not only are there outright lies as part of hip-hop's history, but there are mistakes. And just because you caught a story, in 95, doesn't mean that's the same story in 2005. And so you update the story in 2005 because these pioneers, they don't remember either. So they're saying this in one day and that another day. Who's ongoing with their history too? This is the second part about the intent of the user, the intent of the exploiter. You didn't even continue the history. Wrote that one book one time and I'm good, because it was never your life. It was never your real career. It was never your real study. Now, big up to authors who have multiple hip-hop books. Big up to authors who have immersed themselves, and scholars, historians, who have immersed themselves within the culture. And they might not be able to, you don't have to articulate the culture like KRS-ONE, but you can articulate the culture. You can tell somebody something about hip-hop that matters. Not who sold what, or what fight broke out, or who got married and who got divorced. Like, no, that's not the history. The real history of hip-hop has yet to be written. And let me show you. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Their whole desire to exploit the situation blinds them from what actually caused the situation or what possible effects the situation may bring. Their aim is not history, it's money. On another note, what is a primary source when there is always another side to the story? Hip-hop's historians should also be looking for as many primary sources as we can find, because most world history was written by the exploiters of the world's people. This is why, as historians uncovering reality through history, we should also look at history as historian Howard Zinn does, from the viewpoint of the Arawaks. When it comes to the history of Christopher Columbus, for example, as another example, Mr. Zinn points out when it comes to the history of the Constitution that we should train ourselves to see such an event from the standpoint of the slaves. We should think of Andrew Jackson as the Cherokees saw him, of the Civil War as seen by the New York Irish, of the Mexican War as seen by the deserting soldiers of Scott's army. See, this is talking about the other side of the story. Of the rise of industrialism as seen by the young women in the Lowell textile mills. Of the Spanish-American War as seen by the Cubans. The conquest of the Philippines as seen by black soldiers on Luzon. The Gilded Age as seen by Southern farmers. The First World War as seen by socialists. The Second World War as seen by pacifists. The New Deal as seen by blacks in Harlem. The post-war American empire as seen by peons in Latin America. But again, even if we, end quote. But again, even if we confine ourselves to the standard methodologies for the proper documentation of history, we still find that most, if not all, of hip-hop's early historical writings are grossly imbalanced and in many cases unprofessional. First, let's review the accepted standard. History is generally studied as cause, consequence, change, and continuity. Historical cause means the reason something happened. Cause is the origin of a historical event. Historical consequence means what happened because of an action. It is the result of an event. Historical change means when an event makes things different. Change is the opposite of continuity. Historical continuity means when events do not change, they remain as they are. Continuity is the opposite of change. We can see here how unscholarly many of hip-hop's written histories are. Very few hip-hop historians actually follow any of these standard documenting methodologies, and this is not good for hip-hop. Even standard historical documentation methodologies advocate that the historian comprehend, analyze, evaluate, and interpret the source materials presented within his historical writings. However, this too is not being observed by hip-hop's so-called historians. History is presented to tell a story about specific people, places, or things. In the long run, the history of a people, a place, or a thing is not as important as the story that is being told about those people, places, and things through history. When it comes to a people, a culture, it is the story, the description, the collective tradition, as well as the vision of those people that are explained in their history. Not explained in somebody else's history, explained in their history. As historians, we know that history is supposedly a continuous recording of past events, and that most people also refer to history as the study of past events, or simply public record. In academic circles, history is thought to be a critical analysis of something or someone memorable. But many hip-hoppers have learned that all history is not to be trusted. This is common knowledge amongst us, and this very historical fact is also part of our collective history. The fact that we've been taught a false history about ourselves is history itself. And we must document such historical events with as much primary and secondary source materials as we can find. Many are ready to admit that we have been victims of biased, sexist, racist, and inaccurate historians, but few of us are ready to admit that we are also victims of sincere, reputable, and accurate historians, meaning that whether one is an inaccurate historian or an academically accurate historian, they, historians, are still only giving their interpretations of an event in history. As philosophers Ariel and William Durant have pointed out, quote, "Our knowledge of any past event is always incomplete, probably inaccurate, and clouded with ambivalent evidence and biased historians, and perhaps distorted by our own patriotism or religious partisanship. Most history is guessing, and the rest is prejudice. Even the historian who thinks to rise above partiality for his country, race, creed, or class betrays his secret predilection in his choice of materials and in the nuances of his adjectives," end quote. This is not to say that we should disregard history because it will always be the interpretation of the historian. No. This is to suggest the writing of a new history that is better equipped to balance the scale of racial equality, quality of life, truth, and justice for all. History as we know it is the art of revealing an event as if the event existed on its own with no previous or prior influences. The historian cuts off the influences that led up to the historical event so that only one part or piece of time can be discussed. Likewise, the historian cuts off the influences that continue to occur after the historical event so that the presented piece of time, or the presented piece, can have an ending. The truth, however, is that all events are without beginning, without end, and without form. Every event is part of the continuous flow of events happening in the world at once. This we call an omni-event. The Durants continue, quote, "The historian always oversimplifies and hastily selects a manageable minority of facts and faces out of a crowd of souls and events whose multitude and its complexity he can never quite embrace or comprehend," end quote. In reality, history attempts to document the activities of a continuously developing and changing omni-event. But it seems to be impossible in our time for historians to present an omni-event because we are taught to label and compartmentalize the events we perceive. Most people perceive their reality in bits and pieces, not in waves and vibrations. So their historical reality becomes this happened, then that happened, then this happened, then that happened, etc. Most people never consider the causes of their actions, like who or what influenced their actions. They live as though they are in the world by themselves, unaffected by everyone else and the environment in which they live. Equally, they pay no attention to the never-ending effects of their actions. They live as their history was taught to them, bit by bit, day by day. Do this first, then do that, then do this. Doing everything effortlessly and at once is impossible and even frightening for those people educated in this way. As the Durants continue to point out, quote, "Total perspective is an optical illusion." Like total perspective, that's that omni-event, seeing the omni-event. Quote, "Total perspective is an optical illusion. We do not know the whole of man's history. There were probably many civilizations before the Sumerian or the Egyptian. We've just begun to dig. Therefore, we must operate with partial knowledge and be provisionally content with probabilities. In history, as in science and politics, relativity rules, and all formulas should be suspect." End quote. History is created so that we can discuss parts of a continuously flowing omni-event. Otherwise, we would have to include every influence in existence that contributed to the event we wish to speak about just to be closer to historical accuracy. And still, this would not ensure historical accuracy because we do not know of every influence in our existence. We may never know the true history of anything, much less automobiles, because we can never truly know of all the influences that went into the creation of the very automobile idea. We simply have to accept the automobile story as it is told to us because we simply were not there. Because of this limitation, the historian is forced to literally create a history out of an omni-event. This is why we use history as a guide in our lives, and not as the definition of our lives. No one can truly know the past through historical information. Therefore, it is not wise to exclusively base your identity, ethnic or otherwise, on historical information. History as truth does not exist. What exists as history is a created break in an omni-event. This is why there are many debates between historians as to whose history is the most accurate. History is a socio-political invention for the unity, identity, and form of people, places, and things. Furthermore, public history has more to do with building the present identity of a group than with accurately recording the events of the past. With this in mind, all individual histories will contradict one another. The illusion is that we all have individual histories. The truth is that all human activity on Earth, or in Earth, is one event and connected. In fact, all activity on Earth is one event. History is not truth. History is the perception and opinion of the historian. Historians, no matter how scholarly, only record what is, in their opinion, noteworthy to record. This is, of course, if the historian is recording as an eyewitness to the event. Not only does one record what is noteworthy to his or herself, but more importantly, one also records what is noteworthy to the public. It is the public that dictates the historian's values, which in turn affects his recordings, affects the historian's recordings. The historian will only tell the public the history that appears to be important to the survival and well-being of that public for that time or era. On one hand, the historian records what his value system dictates he should record. On the other hand, the public dictates to the historian which history it wants and needs to hear. Historians are well aware that if one gives the public a piece of history that the public finds offensive or unimportant, the public destroys, discredits, or ignores the work of that historian. So, driven by this invisible code set down by public opinion, historians usually tell the public what it wants to hear. It is only when the public gains more knowledge of itself through life experiences that historians will be able to expound on yet another truth. It is at this point that the past recordings will be subject to change. In fact, the past actually changes. The values that are placed upon the historian influences that historian's work, and in turn the historian's work becomes history, not necessarily the event or person being documented. The public then accepts the historian's work as history because it fits the public's own collective personality. It fits what the public feels about itself. When the collective personality of the public changes, the past changes once again to fit whatever the new public personality is. In truth, it is the present that creates the past. New information revealed in the present changes the public's perception of its past. Let's go ahead and highlight that. We're highlighting paragraph 87. We're highlighting paragraph 87 because when I began studying this, it blew my mind actually about the idea of, how the past, the present, and the future relate to one another. And new information in the present changes how you think about your past. Because remember, we're dealing with an omni event, so no story is true. Or should I put it this way? No story is complete. Every story is incomplete. There's always another side to the story, and there's always more to the story. Whatever story you're getting, whatever history you're getting, is always going to be another side to that story. There's always going to be more to the story. We're highlighting paragraph 87. I want to read it to you one more time and I'll continue. When the collective personality of the public changes, the past changes once again to fit whatever the new public personality is. In truth, it is the present that creates the past. New information revealed in the present changes one's public perception of its past. In addition, historians are inclined to expound upon the history that they may comprehend in a similar reality existing in their own life in the present. It is impossible for the historian to comprehend a part of the past that he has no experience with in his present. It is the historian's present view of reality that shapes the historian's past view of reality. Actually, if an event of the past is not also an event in the historian's present where he can draw an understanding from it, it is as if the past event never happened. You see what I'm saying here? The historian has to see it. He has to be, let me read on. In fact, historians can only study that part of the past that is also active in their present. If a part of the past vanishes with no accessible record of its existence, it is gone forever. The historian, recreating the past for the present, simply does not and cannot see it. We can look at many of the historical encyclopedias of the 20th century and see that even hip-hop was not important enough to be accurately documented in the 1999-2000 century-ending history timelines. Even though hip-hop has had a profound influence upon mainstream American culture, thought, fashion, entertainment, religion, and politics from about 1979 to 2000, hip-hop still was not important enough for today's mainstream historians to include it in their century-ending encyclopedias and other historical timelines regarding the 20th century. Just as the history of Africans in America, Asians in America, Europeans in America, natives in America, and so on are blatantly ignored for the creation of a reality that benefits only one class of people in America, so it is with hip-hop's history in America. The point is that if historians do not have hip-hop in their daily lives, for example, or if they are unaware of hip-hop, or are against hip-hop's expansion, or feel that hip-hop is not an important contribution to popular culture, even hip-hop can be forgotten, can be forever forgotten in the works of various reputable historians. This is not only a matter of deliberately falsifying world events, this is also an issue of outdated and narrow historical documentation techniques and methodologies. Historians must be well-versed in the existences of many cultures and histories in order to tell a more accurate story of their own. As with culture, no one's history exists on its own. Hip-hoppers who document hip-hop culture's history must be aware of this at all times. In this instance, it is the present that creates the past. And that's the lesson here right now. We'll stop here and continue with track 2 next week, next Sunday, same time, 12 o'clock. We haven't changed the time yet. But this is the point, is it is the present that creates the past. New information in the present, your view of the present, your knowledge of the present and knowledge in the present is shaping what you see of your past. If a certain event or object or person is not in the present, like a person or object of the past is not also in the present, somebody documenting history in the present can't see it. You can't see it. If you have no photo of it, there's no existence of it. There are so many things that are just not being discussed in world history or just in basic history that were very important to why people did what they did, why they made the decisions they made, what was being discussed, what was in the air at the time. None of that's being discussed in American history, Black history, African American history, African history, hip-hop history, you name it. Nobody's getting it because the methodologies, the way in which a colonial society has to look at its past is blocking everybody from really seeing what the past is really about. We're not studying the past. We're not getting real information about the past. We're getting a colonial cover-up. We're getting assimilation, indoctrination. That's what we're getting. And if we're really past the colonial era, if we're really not still trying to kill Indians, if we're still not trying to do that, if slavery is really over, then we should be rethinking how we're thinking about the past. Because the slave narrative, the Indian killer narrative, the slaveholder narrative, all of that is not the whole story. What we think of our past is not even what happened. Think about that for a minute. This is not the denial of something, like, we're going to deny the Holocaust, or deny slavery, deny, the Trail of Tears or the plight of the Native Americans wasn't that bad. We ain't doing that. Okay, this is hip hop. But at the same time, you got to take a look at how you are thinking about that past. Yes, slavery existed. You know what went down. But is that all that was going on that plantation? I think we're getting our history too much from Hollywood. And because it comes, and even professors and scholars are watching television shows and watching documentaries and they're taking the Hollywood version of any history and teaching it, as opposed to really thinking about what is being said or shown. And even adding to it, not critiquing the film, but saying, yo, when 12 Years a Slave went down, Nat Turner was going down too. We see dude getting whipped against a tree and so on, but you never show it. Maybe, and of course, it's not in the book. Well, actually, let me say this: it's not in the book where when black people got whipped against a tree, the one who whipped them was found dead or poisoned or whatever the next day or the next week or the next month. The retaliation of the African was never discussed. And this is a major part as to why white folk were so brutal to Africans, because Africans were so brutal with them. The plight to get free, a terrorized person will do anything to get away from you. And they were doing it. Speaking of 12 Years a Slave, the book, when you read the book 12 Years a Slave, you'll notice major changes. And you ask, why did they change these things? Like for instance, in the book, it talks about 12 Years a Slave, the book, it talks about a woman who was tricked into being a slave. That she was, not tricked into being a slave. She was already a so-called slave for some man, some white man. And she had children by him too, by the way. They didn't mention that in 12 Years a Slave. They showed the woman, it's the woman that's in the jail cell with the kids, her. They talk about her in the book, and they say the white man told her all day, you're going to be free today. I'm going to get you freedom today. Today's the day where you get your freedom. And it was a deal that they had made. Say, today's the day for the freedom. He walked her right down to the jail and handed her over. Now, mind you, she was well dressed. This was Freedom Day. So she put on her clothes, which was, top-notch dresses. She had her two kids would have dressed them. They had gold earrings, gold rings, and gold necklaces on them. They walked in. He sold them right to the jailer because he was in debt. Sold them, tricked her into going down there because he knew she wasn't going if he had told her what was up. Tricked her, went down there. So now she's in the jail. They didn't put that in the movie. They didn't put the fact that she had gold. They put rags on her in the movie like she was already destitute. No, this woman had come from a rich family and was well off as a servant, as much as a servant could be, and was tricked by her employer into slavery. She got in there with the kids, and what they said was her and him, the lead actor for 12 Years a Slave, were the only two people in it. In the book, they were the only two in there. The rest of the people in the jail were kids, like 15 of them. And all the kids would crowd around this woman because they were so frightened and terrified of what was going on. And all of this, and you keep reading the book and you see the horror in it. They're beating kids, 8 years old, 10 years old, 13 years old. They're raping kids, 10 years old, 9 years old. This is what's, but that don't gel well on the TV. You're not gonna pay for that, at least not yet, to see a white man raping a young black boy. a white man raping a young black girl. You don't want to see that on the TV. They'll show you an older black woman or someone that looks more like in their 20s and 30s, something like, at least a 20-year-old. You can get raped. You can get beat, branded with hot iron. That's Hollywood. The age of the average enslaved African was 18. The average. Now imagine, they said it was 4 million so-called slaves in the United States, in the northern part of the United States, 4 million. Okay, most of that was children. But that don't go well on Hollywood. That you don't want to see that. Really? That's what they were doing? Yeah, they were raping children. They were hanging children. They were shooting children. Starving children. They denied children an education. They wanted to keep them slaves for life. And many of us are still not getting out of this. We're not really out of it. It's still on us. Too many of us, I should say. So this is something we got to think about. And this is the real importance of history and how to approach it. There's always another side to the story. The way we are perceiving slavery, it's not even the way slavery went down. The way we perceiving it, it never happened the way we see it. We don't humanize the so-called African, our ancestor. We don't humanize them. We go with what the TV told us. We go with what Hollywood told us. They was just slaves and getting whipped and beaten. They never got free. They never killed that dude. They never plotted and got rid of him. They're not telling you the statistics that only 50% of the slave ships that left Africa made it here. Only half. It was a 50-50 thing. Based on the years, some statistics go up to 60%, 70%. At the height of the slave trade, you can get a ship coming across. But at the beginning of the slave trade and at the end of slave trading, transatlantic slave trading, nah, you could. Those ships were not just coming across. First of all, weather knocked out a lot of them. Mad revolts and mutinies and planned rebellions happened on the ship, and many of them ships were steered back by the Africans that took over the ship. Then there were pirates. Just because you English with slaves in your ship, the Dutch will come and rob you. You Dutch, matter of fact, we supposed to be, African Americans are supposed to come here on a Dutch ship that was supposed to have robbed a Spanish ship. And we was on the Spanish ship, supposedly, and a Dutch ship robbed the Spanish ship. Now they say it was an English ship that robbed the Spanish ship. What is it? Well, the more evidence that comes out in the present, the more the past changes again. Some say the boat was called the White Lion. Some say it was the Kathy Constant. Some say it was the Treasurer. The Batista. We got like 5, 6, 7 names for the ship that's supposed to have brought the first 20 Africans. Nobody know what the number is there either. Jamestown, Virginia, The 1619 Project says it was Hampton, Virginia, not Jamestown. What do we know? Every story got another story to it. But if you adopting stories and making them part of your life and part of who you think you are, this is what's limiting you to the story. To the story. So this is our approach to history. This is the gospel of hip-hop. Of course, you are checking out the Temple of Hip-Hop. I am KRS-ONE. Shout out to everybody who is part of this call and been part of this call, been part of the Temple of Hip-Hop. That's going to be it for me right now. I'll see you next week on Sunday, 12 o'clock. And we'll get it started, 12 noon. Peace and much love to all of you. Live life in righteousness. Peace.